Tonight, we're going to explore something wonderfully ordinary, something you've done thousands of times in your life, something so familiar it simply happens and then it's gone, barely leaving a trace in your memory. We're going to talk about yawning. Now, I know what you might be thinking, spending all this time just talking about yawning, but that's exactly what makes this perfect for tonight. Because sometimes the most beautiful discoveries are hidden in the simplest places, in the everyday moments we usually pass right by. So go ahead and get comfortable, settle into your pillow, let your body sink a little deeper into whatever surface is supporting you right now. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing you need to do, except listen and let your mind gently wander with me. You might find yourself yawning as we talk tonight. That's perfectly natural. In fact, it's part of the journey. Just let it happen. Notice how it feels. There's something deeply satisfying about a good yawn, isn't there? Tonight, we'll explore this curious little reflex together, wandering through its mysteries at a gentle pace. We'll discover what's actually happening in your body when you yawn, why it feels the way it does, and why just thinking about yawning or seeing someone else yawn can trigger one of your own. We'll look at the fascinating theories scientists have developed over the years. We'll meet some of the animals who yawn, just like we do. And we'll consider the mysteries that still remain, because even something as simple as a yawn holds secrets we're still uncovering. There's something peaceful about turning your attention to these quiet corners of life, the things that don't demand anything from us, the small wonders that happen so naturally, so automatically, that we forget they're wonders at all. Tonight is about rediscovering that sense of gentle curiosity, letting yourself be interested in something simple, without pressure, without effort. But mostly, we're just going to take our time. Let the words wash over you. There's no test at the end, no need to remember every detail. This is simply time to rest your mind on something gentle and curious, something that asks nothing of you. So take a deep breath if you'd like, and let's begin our quiet exploration into the wonderful, ordinary mystery of why we yawn. So let's begin with the yawn itself, with what actually happens in those few seconds when a yawn takes over. You know the feeling. It starts with a kind of tension, an almost irresistible urge building somewhere deep inside, and then your mouth opens wider than it does for almost anything else. Your jaw stretches. The muscles in your face pull taut. And then comes the breath. That long, deep inhalation. Your lungs expand. Your chest rises. Air flows in, filling spaces that don't usually get quite so much attention. For a moment, you're held there, suspended in that peak of the yawn. And then the release, the exhale, often with a sound, a sigh, or that soft vocalization that just seems to come naturally. Your eyes might water a little, your whole body might stretch along with it, and then it's over, usually in about 6 seconds, sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more. But it passes quickly, leaving behind a kind of satisfaction, a sense of completion. It's such a specific sequence of events, isn't it? So precise, so automatic. You don't decide to yawn the way you decide to, say, scratch your nose or clear your throat. A yawn just happens to you. Scientists call it a stereotyped behavior. That means it follows the same pattern every time, in every person. Your yawns look remarkably like my yawns, which look remarkably like yawns from people on the other side of the world or from centuries ago. We're all following the same ancient script written somewhere deep in our biology. Let's slow down even more and notice what's really going on in your body during those 6 seconds. First, there's your jaw. When you yawn, your jaw opens to its maximum extent, wider than it does when you're eating, wider than when you're speaking or singing. The temporomandibular joint. That's the hinge where your jaw connects to your skull. It stretches to its limit. You can feel it if you pay attention. That slight strain, that full extension. Your face changes too. The muscles around your eyes tighten. That's why your eyes often close or partially close during a yawn. And it's why tears sometimes form, not because you're sad or emotional, but simply because those muscles are putting pressure on your tear ducts. Meanwhile, deeper inside, your throat is opening wide. Your larynx, your voice box, drops down, creating a clear passage for air. If you could look inside your mouth during a yawn, you'd see your soft palate rising, the back of your tongue dropping. And then there's the breath itself. That inhale during a yawn is different from your regular breathing. It's deeper, more forceful. You're taking in much more air than you do in a typical breath. Your diaphragm, that dome-shaped muscle below your lungs, contracts strongly, pulling down, creating space for your lungs to expand fully. Sometimes a yawn comes with a stretch. Your arms might reach up and back. Your spine might arch. Your whole body participates. This combination, the yawn and the stretch together, is called pandiculation. It's one of those wonderful words that exists just to describe something we all do but rarely name. And here's something curious. You can't really force a yawn, not a real one anyway. You can fake the movements, sure, open your mouth wide, take a deep breath, but it doesn't feel the same, does it? A genuine yawn has a quality of inevitability to it. Once it starts, you're just along for the ride. Trying to suppress a yawn is nearly impossible, and slightly uncomfortable when you try. There are different qualities to yawns too, if you've ever noticed. Some yawns are these huge, jaw-cracking affairs that seem to take over your entire body. Others are smaller, gentler, almost polite. Morning yawns often feel different from evening yawns. Tired yawns have a different character than bored yawns. Though we'll get into why you might yawn when you're bored a little later. The sound of a yawn varies too. Some people yawn silently, others vocalize, that reflexive ah sound that just seems to come out. Neither is right or wrong. It's just part of your own personal yawning style, developed without any conscious thought over thousands of yawns throughout your life. And then there's that feeling afterward, that sense of relief, of completion. Scientists aren't entirely sure why yawning feels satisfying, but it does. There's a reason we don't fight our yawns. They feel good. They feel like exactly what our body needed in that moment. So that's the yawn itself. This brief, automatic, strangely satisfying reflex that we all share. A 6-second event that involves your jaw, your face, your throat, your lungs, your diaphragm, sometimes your whole body, all coordinating perfectly without any instruction from your conscious mind. In a moment, we'll explore what's happening in your brain to orchestrate all of this. But for now, just rest with the simplicity of it. The familiar comfort of something your body knows how to do so well, that it's been doing since before you were even born. So we've looked at what happens in your body when you yawn. Now let's take a gentle journey inward to the part of you that decides a yawn should happen in the first place, your brain. Now, when we think about the brain controlling our actions, we often think about decisions, conscious choices. I'm going to pick up this cup. I'm going to say these words. But yawning isn't like that. You don't decide to yawn. Instead, somewhere deep in your brain, below the level of your awareness, something determines that right now, a yawn is needed. The part of your brain responsible for yawning is ancient, primitive, in the most beautiful sense of that word. It's tucked away in an area called the hypothalamus, a small but incredibly important region deep in the center of your brain. The hypothalamus is one of your brain's control centers. It manages things you never think about: your body temperature, your hunger and thirst, your sleep-wake cycles, all the automatic processes that keep you alive and functioning. And somewhere in there, nestled among all these vital functions, is the trigger for yawning. More specifically, there's a region called the paraventricular nucleus. It's a tiny area, really, but it seems to be the conductor of the yawning orchestra. When neurons in this region become active, they send signals cascading outward to all the different parts of your body involved in a yawn. Think about that for a moment. This tiny cluster of cells, so small you'd need a microscope to see it clearly, coordinates your jaw, your breathing muscles, your face, your throat, all in perfect synchrony, without you having to think about any of it. Scientists discovered this through careful research, studying what happens when different parts of the brain are damaged or stimulated or simply observed while people yawn. They found that when this specific region is activated, yawning follows, and when it's impaired, yawning becomes less frequent or disappears entirely. But what tells this region to activate in the first place? What's the signal that says, now is the time for a yawn? This is where brain chemistry comes in. Your brain operates through chemicals called neurotransmitters, tiny molecules that carry messages between brain cells. Different neurotransmitters create different effects, and certain neurotransmitters seem to be particularly involved in yawning. One of the key players is dopamine. You might have heard of dopamine. It's often called the reward chemical, involved in pleasure and motivation. When dopamine levels rise in certain parts of your brain, yawning becomes more likely. This is why certain medications that affect dopamine can change how often people yawn. Then there's serotonin, another neurotransmitter you might have heard of, often associated with mood and well-being. Serotonin seems to have a more complex relationship with yawning. In some situations, it promotes yawning. In others, it might inhibit it. The brain is rarely simple. Acetylcholine is involved too, a neurotransmitter important for attention and arousal, and oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, also appears to play a role. In fact, when researchers give animals oxytocin, they yawn more frequently. It's like a delicate chemical dance happening constantly in your brain, below your awareness. These molecules rising and falling, interacting with each other, creating conditions that sometimes result in that irresistible urge to yawn. And here's something fascinating. Yawning seems to be connected to transitions, changes in your state of being. Think about when you yawn. Often it's when you're waking up, transitioning from sleep to wakefulness, or when you're getting tired, transitioning from alertness toward sleep, or when you're bored and your attention is shifting, or when you're about to do something that requires focus. Your brain is constantly managing your level of arousal. And by arousal, we just mean how alert and activated you are. Not too sleepy, not too wired, but somewhere in the right zone for whatever you're doing. And yawning seems to be one of the tools your brain uses to help manage these transitions. Some scientists think yawning might help wake you up when you're getting too drowsy. Others think it might help you calm down when you're too activated. It might work differently in different situations, your brain using the same tool for different purposes, depending on what's needed. There's also something deeply satisfying about a yawn, isn't there? That sense of relief, of completion. This suggests that yawning activates reward pathways in your brain, that there's a neurological reason it feels good. It's possible that this satisfaction is part of why we don't resist yawning. Our brain essentially rewards us for doing something it has determined we need to do. It's elegant, really. This system of automatic behavior and built-in reinforcement. Your brain stem, the ancient part of your brain that connects to your spinal cord, is also involved. This makes sense when you remember that yawning isn't unique to humans. Many animals yawn, including creatures with much simpler brains than ours. The basic yawning mechanism must be old, very old. Evolutionarily speaking, in fact, ultrasounds have shown that human fetuses yawn in the womb, before birth, before breathing air, before ever experiencing tiredness or boredom, or any of the situations we associate with yawning. The circuitry is there, wired in, ready to function. This tells us something profound. Yawning isn't learned, it's not cultural. It's built into the basic architecture of your nervous system. It's part of your biological inheritance, something you share not just with all other humans, but with countless other species, stretching back through time. And yet, despite all we've learned about the brain regions and chemicals involved, there's still mystery here. We know where yawning comes from in the brain. We know some of the neurotransmitters involved, but we don't fully know why your brain decides to make you yawn at any particular moment. We don't completely understand what purpose it serves, what problem it's solving. We have theories, good theories, which we'll explore shortly, but no single definitive answer. Isn't that wonderful, in a way? That something so common, so automatic, so thoroughly studied, still holds questions we're working to answer. So rest here for a moment with this image of your brain, this extraordinary organ, humming along with its ancient mechanisms, managing your body, your states of consciousness, your transitions through the day, and among all its countless functions, occasionally sending out that signal, the one that makes you open your mouth wide, take that deep breath, and experience those few seconds of a yawn, all without you ever having to think about it. So now we arrive at one of the most intriguing questions. We know what happens when we yawn. We know where in the brain it originates. But why? What purpose does yawning actually serve? You might think the answer would be obvious by now. After all, humans have been yawning since the beginning of humanity. Scientists have been studying yawning for well over a century. Surely we'd have figured this out by now. But here's the beautiful thing about science and about nature. Sometimes the simplest questions lead to the deepest mysteries, and the question of why we yawn has led researchers down many different paths, each one revealing something interesting, none of them quite telling the complete story. Let's start with the theory you've probably heard, the one that seems to make the most intuitive sense, the oxygen theory. For a long time, many people believed that we yawn because our blood needs more oxygen. The idea goes like this. When you're tired or sitting still for a long time, your breathing becomes shallow. Oxygen levels drop, carbon dioxide builds up. Your body needs to correct this imbalance, so it triggers a yawn, that big, deep breath that floods your system with fresh oxygen and clears out the stale carbon dioxide. It makes sense, doesn't it? Yawning feels like a big gulp of air, and we often yawn when we're tired, when we've been inactive, when we might plausibly need more oxygen. There's just one problem with this theory. It's almost certainly wrong. Researchers tested this hypothesis quite thoroughly. They had people breathe air with different oxygen levels, some with extra oxygen, some with less. If the oxygen theory were correct, people breathing oxygen-rich air should yawn less, and people breathing oxygen-poor air should yawn more. But that's not what happened. The amount of oxygen in the air made no difference to how often people yawned. People kept yawning at the same rate, regardless of how much oxygen they were getting. They tried other variations too. They measured blood oxygen levels before and after yawning. No significant change. They had people exercise to increase their oxygen needs. Didn't make them yawn more. The evidence just didn't support the theory. Yawning, it turns out, isn't about oxygen after all. So, if not oxygen, then what? One of the most interesting current theories is called the brain cooling hypothesis. This theory suggests that yawning helps regulate the temperature of your brain. Your brain generates heat as it works. All those billions of neurons firing, all that constant electrical and chemical activity, it produces warmth. Too much heat and your brain doesn't function as well. You get foggy, tired, less able to think clearly. So your brain needs cooling. It has several mechanisms for this. Blood flow helps carry heat away. But according to this theory, yawning provides an additional cooling method. Here's how it might work. When you yawn, you take in a large volume of cool air. This air passes over the blood vessels in your face, your sinuses, your throat. The blood in these vessels cools down slightly. That cooled blood then flows to your brain, helping to lower its temperature. At the same time, the stretching motion of a yawn, the way your jaw opens wide, the way the muscles of your face activate, this increases blood flow to the head. More blood flow means more efficient heat exchange. Some researchers have even found that people yawn more often when the ambient temperature is in a certain range. Not too hot, not too cold, but in that middle zone where cooling through yawning would be most effective. When it's very hot outside, we apparently yawn less, perhaps because bringing in hot air wouldn't help cool the brain. There's also the observation that we often yawn during transitions. Waking up, getting drowsy, preparing to focus. These are times when brain temperature might need regulation. When you're sleeping, your brain temperature drops. As you wake up, it rises. A morning yawn might help manage that warming process. It's an elegant theory, and there's some evidence to support it. But like most things involving the brain, it's probably not the whole story. Another theory focuses not on temperature, but on arousal and state changes. Remember how we talked about yawning happening during transitions? This theory takes that observation and makes it central. It suggests that yawning helps your brain shift between different states of alertness. Think of your brain as having different modes: sleep mode, alert mode, focused mode, relaxed mode. Throughout your day, you're constantly shifting between these modes. And these shifts require coordination. Changes in neurotransmitter levels, changes in which brain regions are more or less active, changes in your physiology. Yawning might be part of that coordination process, a way of signaling and facilitating a state change. When you yawn right before bed, maybe you're helping your brain transition into sleep mode. When you yawn while waking up, you're facilitating the shift toward alertness. When you yawn while bored, perhaps you're trying to increase your arousal level to bring yourself back to a more alert state. This would explain why yawning is associated with so many different situations. It's not about one specific problem, like low oxygen or high temperature. It's about managing transitions, helping your brain and body shift gears smoothly. There's some evidence for this too. Yawning does seem to increase heart rate slightly and to activate certain brain regions. It changes your physiological state, at least temporarily. And then there's the social and communication theory. Humans are deeply social creatures. We're constantly sending signals to each other, often without realizing it. And yawning might be one of those signals. When you yawn in a group, what information does that convey? It might indicate that you're tired, that you're bored, that you're not feeling stimulated by what's happening. In our evolutionary past, this kind of information could have been useful. If several members of a group started yawning as evening approached, it might have served as a signal. Time to settle down. Time to prepare for rest. Synchronizing sleep schedules could have been important for safety and group cohesion. Or consider yawning from boredom. That signal might indicate to others that whatever's happening isn't engaging, isn't holding attention. In a social context, that information could prompt changes in behavior or activity. The fact that yawning is contagious, that seeing someone yawn makes you more likely to yawn, supports this idea of yawning as communication. We'll explore contagious yawning more deeply in a bit, but for now, just notice how it fits with this theory. If yawning is partly about signaling within a group, then it makes sense that yawns would spread from person to person. Some researchers think yawning might even have played a role in keeping groups alert. If one person yawns and others follow, it might briefly increase everyone's arousal level, helping the group maintain vigilance. So which theory is correct? Here's where we arrive at something important, something almost relaxing in its honesty. We don't know, not for certain anyway. It's entirely possible that yawning serves multiple functions, that it helps cool the brain and facilitates state changes and serves as a social signal. Evolution doesn't always create single-purpose mechanisms. Often, a behavior or trait serves multiple functions simultaneously. Or maybe one of these theories is mostly right, and we just haven't gathered enough evidence yet to be sure. What we do know is that yawning is ancient, automatic, and apparently important enough that evolution has preserved it across countless species over millions of years. That alone tells us something. Nature doesn't maintain behaviors that serve no purpose. The energy cost might be small, but over evolutionary time, useless behaviors tend to disappear. So yawning must be doing something valuable, something important enough to keep. And isn't there something peaceful about not knowing everything, about living with questions alongside our answers? We can understand so much about yawning, the mechanics, the brain regions, the circumstances that trigger it, and still leave room for mystery. Science is often presented as a collection of facts, of certainties, but really, it's a process of asking questions, gathering evidence, proposing explanations, testing them. Some questions get answered quickly, others take decades or centuries, and some, like why we yawn, remain partly open, inviting curiosity, welcoming new perspectives. So as you lie there, perhaps feeling that familiar urge to yawn building, or perhaps having already yawned several times, you can know that you're participating in something genuinely mysterious. Something scientists are still working to fully understand. Your body knows what to do. Your brain knows when to trigger it, but the complete why remains beautifully, peacefully uncertain. Now we come to one of the most fascinating aspects of yawning, something you've almost certainly experienced, probably many times. Contagious yawning. You see someone yawn, and suddenly you feel that familiar urge rising in yourself. Or you read the word yawn, or even just think about yawning. And there it is, that irresistible pull. Even now, as we've been talking about yawning for a while, You've probably yawned at least once, maybe several times. That's contagious yawning at work. It's such a strange phenomenon when you really think about it. Yawning isn't like sneezing or coughing, where you might have a physical reason to mimic what you see. There's no immediate benefit to yawning just because someone else did. And yet, we do it anyway. Let's explore this curious aspect of being human. First, let's be clear about what we mean by contagious yawning. It's not that yawns spread like a virus or that there's something in the air. What we mean is that witnessing someone else yawn, or sometimes just thinking about yawning, increases the likelihood that you'll yawn yourself within the next few minutes. It doesn't happen every time. You don't automatically yawn every time you see someone else yawn, but the probability increases significantly. Studies have shown that seeing someone yawn makes you about twice as likely to yawn yourself within the next few minutes. And it's not just seeing someone yawn directly. Videos of people yawning work, still photographs work, even reading about yawning, as you're doing right now, can trigger it. Just the concept of yawning, represented in any form, is enough to activate that response. So what's happening here? Why would your brain create a yawn in response to perceiving someone else's yawn? The leading explanation involves something called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are a special type of brain cell that activates both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that same action. They were first discovered in the early 1990s, quite by accident, in studies of monkeys, and they've revolutionized our understanding of how we relate to others. These neurons essentially allow your brain to simulate what you're observing. When you see someone reach for a cup, mirror neurons associated with reaching activate in your own brain. You're not actually reaching, but your brain is running a kind of preview of what that action would feel like. This system is thought to be crucial for learning through observation, for understanding others' intentions, and for empathy. When you see someone stub their toe and wince, you might wince too. That's mirror neurons helping you understand and share their experience. Contagious yawning seems to work through a similar mechanism. When you see someone yawn, mirror neurons activate the same neural pathways that produce yawning in yourself. Your brain simulates their yawn, and sometimes that simulation becomes real. The imagined yawn becomes an actual yawn. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not everyone experiences contagious yawning to the same degree. Young children, particularly those under about 4 or 5 years old, generally don't show contagious yawning. They'll yawn on their own, of course. Spontaneous yawning starts before birth, but seeing someone else yawn doesn't trigger yawns in young children the way it does in older children and adults. This is significant because it coincides with the development of theory of mind. The ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, and perspectives. As children develop this capacity for social cognition, contagious yawning emerges. Similarly, individuals with conditions that affect social cognition, such as autism spectrum disorder, often show reduced contagious yawning. This doesn't mean they don't yawn. Spontaneous yawning is normal, but the social trigger, the response to seeing others yawn, is often diminished. This suggests that contagious yawning isn't just about mirror neurons in isolation. It's connected to our capacity for empathy, for social understanding, for connecting with others. In fact, some studies have found that you're more likely to catch a yawn from someone you're close to than from a stranger. You're more susceptible to yawning when you see a friend or family member yawn than when you see an unfamiliar person yawn. The social bond seems to strengthen the effect. Think about what this means. Your brain is more attuned to the people you care about, more responsive to their states, their signals. When someone close to you yawns, your brain pays more attention, engages more deeply with that simulation, and you're more likely to yawn yourself. It's a small thing, a yawn, but it reveals something beautiful about how we're wired for connection. Now, contagious yawning isn't unique to humans. We share this trait with several other species. Chimpanzees show contagious yawning. So do bonobos. Dogs can catch yawns from humans, and they're more likely to catch yawns from their own owners than from strangers, just like the pattern we see in people. Even some birds, like budgerigars, seem to show a form of contagious yawning. This suggests that the mechanisms underlying contagious yawning have deep evolutionary roots. It's not something that arose uniquely in humans. It's an ancient feature of social animals, creatures that live in groups and need to coordinate with each other. But what purpose might contagious yawning serve? Why would evolution maintain this feature? One possibility is that it helps synchronize group behavior. If yawning is related to state changes, to transitions in arousal level, then having yawns spread through a group could help everyone shift together. Time to rest, time to wake up, time to increase alertness. In our evolutionary past, being synchronized with your group could have had real survival value. Sleeping at the same time, maintaining vigilance together, coordinating activity patterns. These things would have helped small human groups survive and thrive. Another possibility is that contagious yawning is simply a byproduct of our empathy and social cognition systems. Maybe it doesn't serve a specific purpose on its own, but exists because it emerges from neural systems that do serve important purposes. The systems that allow us to understand each other, to feel with each other, to navigate our social world. Not everything in biology exists because it's directly useful. Sometimes things exist because they're connected to other things that are useful. Contagious yawning might be in that category, or perhaps it serves purposes we haven't fully identified yet. Remember, we're still unraveling the mysteries of why we yawn at all. The contagious aspect adds another layer of complexity, another set of questions. What we can say is this: contagious yawning reveals something about your social nature, about the way your brain is constantly monitoring others, simulating their experiences, connecting with their states. Even something as simple as a yawn becomes a form of communication, a thread in the social fabric that connects us to each other. So, if you've yawned while listening to this, and there's a good chance you have, take a moment to appreciate what just happened. Your brain responded to the concept of yawning, to the discussion of it, to the simulation of it. Your mirror neurons activated, your empathy systems engaged, and your body produced this ancient automatic response. You yawned not because you needed to, not because of oxygen or brain temperature or state changes, but because we've been talking about yawning, because ideas and words and images can trigger real physical responses, because you're a social creature, wired for connection, influenced by others even in the smallest ways. Isn't that remarkable? We've talked about human yawning, but we are far from alone in this behavior. Yawning extends across the animal kingdom in the most wonderful way. It's one of those threads that connects us to countless other species. A reminder that for all our unique human qualities, we share so much with the other creatures on this planet. Let's take a gentle journey through the animal world and meet some of the yawners we share it with. Start with our closest relatives, the great apes. Chimpanzees yawn, gorillas yawn, orangutans yawn, bonobos yawn. Watch footage of these animals and you'll see yawns that look remarkably familiar. The wide mouth, the stretched jaw, the visible satisfaction afterward. If you didn't know which species you were watching, you might mistake their yawn for a human one. This makes sense, of course. We share a common ancestor with these species relatively recently in evolutionary terms. The neural circuitry for yawning was present in that ancestor, and we all inherited it. But yawning goes much further back than the great apes. Monkeys yawn. All sorts of monkeys, baboons, macaques, capuchins. Watch a troop of monkeys in the morning and you might see yawns rippling through the group as they wake up and begin their day. Move further from our branch of the evolutionary tree. Lemurs yawn. These distant primate cousins, separated from us by tens of millions of years of evolution, still share this behavior. Step outside the primates entirely. Dogs yawn. You've probably seen your dog yawn if you have one, or noticed dogs yawning in videos or in person. And as we mentioned earlier, dogs can catch yawns from humans. They're watching us, attuned to our signals, and sometimes they yawn in response to seeing us yawn. Cats yawn too. That luxurious feline yawn, often accompanied by a stretch. Another moment of connection across species. Horses yawn. Cattle yawn. Pigs yawn. Sheep yawn. The animals we've domesticated, lived alongside, worked with for thousands of years. They're all yawning right along with us. But it's not just mammals. Birds yawn. Parrots yawn quite noticeably. You can see their beaks open wide, see the stretch in their posture. Penguins yawn. Even chickens yawn, though you might need to watch carefully to catch it. And some birds, like those budgergars we mentioned, show signs of contagious yawning with each other. Imagine that. These small birds, with their tiny brains so different from ours, sharing this socially contagious behavior. Reptiles yawn too. Snakes yawn, though in their case, it's harder to tell if it serves the same function. Snakes also yawn-like movements to realign their jaws after eating, so the behavior might have multiple purposes. Lizards yawn, turtles yawn. These ancient creatures, whose lineages stretch back hundreds of millions of years, carry yawning with them. Even fish have been observed doing something that looks very much like yawning. Opening their mouths wide, stretching their jaws. Whether it's exactly the same phenomenon is hard to say, but the resemblance is striking. So yawning appears across mammals, birds, reptiles, possibly fish. This tells us something profound. The basic mechanism of yawning must be very, very old. It predates the split between different vertebrate groups. It's been preserved through vast stretches of evolutionary time. When something persists like that, across such different species, in such different environments, it suggests that yawning serves a genuinely important function. Maybe different functions in different species, or maybe the same core function, but something valuable enough that natural selection has maintained it for hundreds of millions of years. Now, not all yawns are the same across species. In some animals, particularly primates, yawning can serve as a display. Male baboons, for instance, have large canine teeth. When they yawn, those teeth are prominently visible. Sometimes these yawns seem to be directed at rivals or potential threats, a way of saying, "Look at my weapons," a form of communication, even intimidation. Other animals yawn most frequently during particular times. Many species yawn more during transitions, waking up, settling down for rest, changes in activity, just like humans. Some animals yawn more when they're stressed or anxious. Guinea pigs, for instance, often yawn when they're nervous. It might be a self-soothing behavior, a way of regulating their state. Rats yawn. Mice yawn. These small rodents going about their quick, busy lives pause occasionally for a yawn. Even fetuses of various species yawn in the womb. This has been observed in humans, as we mentioned, but also in other mammals. The behavior is present before birth, before any possibility of learning it or seeing it modeled. It's built in, ready to go. What does all this diversity tell us? It suggests that yawning is deeply embedded in vertebrate biology. It's not a quirk of humans or even of mammals. It's something fundamental about how certain nervous systems work, how certain bodies function. And yet, despite being so widespread, yawning still holds mysteries. We see it everywhere in the animal kingdom, but we can't ask a dog or a bird or a snake why they yawn. We can only observe, measure, compare, and theorize. Different species might yawn for slightly different reasons, or the same reasons might apply across species. A horse yawning in a field and you yawning in bed might be serving the exact same function, or different functions that happen to use similar mechanisms. What's wonderful is this sense of kinship, this recognition that we're part of something larger. When you yawn, you're doing something that countless other creatures do, something that connects you not just to other humans, but to chimpanzees and dogs and parrots and turtles and fish. It's a small thing, a yawn, but it's also a reminder, a connection point, a shared experience that crosses the boundaries of species. So the next time you see an animal yawn, a pet, an animal in a video, a creature at a zoo, you might feel that little spark of recognition, that sense of commonality. They're doing what you do. You're both participants in this ancient, automatic, still somewhat mysterious behavior. We're all yawning together, and we have been for a very, very long time. Let's turn our attention now to the rhythms of yawning, the patterns and cycles that shape when you yawn throughout your day. Because yawning isn't random. It has a rhythm to it, a relationship with time, with your body's natural cycles, with the ebb and flow of your daily life. Think about your own experience for a moment. When do you tend to yawn? For most people, there are certain predictable times. Morning is a big one. Those first yawns as you're waking up, as your body is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. Your alarm goes off, or light filters through the window, and before you're even fully conscious, there's that yawn. Morning yawns have a particular quality, don't they? They often come with stretches. Your arms reach up, your back arches, your whole body seems to participate. It's as if your entire system is waking up together, coordinated by that yawn. Then, as the day progresses, yawning tends to decrease during your most alert hours. Typically mid-morning and early afternoon for most people, yawning becomes less frequent. You're engaged, active, moving through your tasks and activities. The urge to yawn recedes. But then, for many people, there's an afternoon lull. That post-lunch dip in energy. You might find yourself yawning more again, particularly if you're sitting still, if you're in a warm room, if you're doing something that doesn't fully engage your attention. This afternoon dip is a real phenomenon tied to your circadian rhythms. Your body has natural cycles of alertness and drowsiness that occur throughout the day, not just at night. And that mid-afternoon period, typically somewhere between 1 and 4 in the afternoon, is when many people experience a natural decrease in alertness. Your body temperature drops slightly, your attention wavers, and you yawn. Then, as evening approaches, yawning increases again. As your body begins preparing for sleep, as the day winds down, those yawns return. Evening yawns, like morning yawns, signal a transition, but this time the transition is in the other direction, from wakefulness toward sleep. These patterns are connected to something called your circadian rhythm, your internal biological clock. Your circadian rhythm is a roughly 24-hour cycle that regulates countless aspects of your physiology. body temperature, hormone levels, alertness, sleep, and wake times. All of these follow circadian patterns. And yawning seems to be tied into this system. Your body temperature, for instance, follows a predictable daily pattern. It's lowest in the early morning, rises throughout the day, peaks in the late afternoon or early evening, and then drops again as you approach sleep. And yawning frequency seems to correlate with some of these temperature changes, particularly with the transitions, the times when temperature is rising or falling rather than stable. This fits with that brain cooling theory we discussed earlier. If yawning helps regulate brain temperature, it makes sense that you'd yawn more during times when your temperature is changing. But it's not just about temperature. Your alertness levels follow circadian patterns too, and yawning, as we've discussed, seems connected to arousal states and state changes. When you're in that in-between space, not fully asleep but not fully alert, yawning becomes more likely. You're in transition, and yawning is part of how your body manages that transition. There's also the influence of light. Your circadian rhythm is primarily regulated by light exposure. Bright light, especially blue light, signals to your body that it's time to be awake and alert. Darkness signals that it's time to wind down towards sleep. In our modern world, we've disrupted these natural light patterns with artificial lighting, screens, and the ability to be active at any hour. But your body still carries those ancient patterns, still responds to light and darkness in deep, automatic ways. Morning light helps wake you up, and those morning yawns are part of that waking process. Evening darkness encourages the production of melatonin, the hormone that promotes sleep, and those evening yawns are part of the transition into that sleepy state. Yawning also responds to what you're doing, not just what time it is. Boredom triggers yawning. We've all experienced this. Sitting through a long, unstimulating meeting or lecture, and the yawns start coming. Your attention is wandering, your arousal level is dropping, and your body responds with yawns. It's not that you necessarily need sleep. You might not be tired at all, but the lack of stimulation, the lack of engagement, creates a state that triggers yawning. Perhaps as an attempt to increase your arousal level, to bring yourself back to alertness. Interestingly, when you're fully engaged in something, deeply focused, interested, stimulated, you yawn much less, regardless of what time it is. Your arousal level is high, your attention is captured, and the urge to yawn diminishes. This is why you can stay up late working on something fascinating without yawning much, but yawn repeatedly during a boring task in the middle of the day when you're not particularly tired. Stress and anxiety can affect yawning patterns too. Some people yawn more when they're nervous or anxious. Athletes sometimes yawn before competitions. Paratroopers yawn before their first jump. It seems counterintuitive. These are moments of high arousal, not low arousal. But yawning might serve a regulatory function here too, helping to modulate stress responses. The rhythms of yawning are also influenced by your sleep quality and quantity. If you're sleep deprived, you'll yawn more throughout the day. Your body is struggling to maintain alertness, struggling with the transition from sleep to wake that isn't complete because you haven't had enough rest, and yawning increases as a result. Similarly, if your sleep schedule is disrupted, if you're dealing with jet lag or working irregular hours or adjusting to a new sleep pattern, you might notice changes in your yawning patterns. Your circadian rhythm is out of sync, and yawning reflects that disruption. There's something peaceful about recognizing these patterns, about noticing how your body moves through its daily rhythms. The morning yawns as you wake, the potential afternoon dip, the evening yawns as you prepare for rest. Your body knows what time it is in a deep, biological sense. It's tracking the passage of hours, the cycle of day and night, the transitions between states. And yawning is one of the many signals of that internal timekeeping. You don't have to think about any of this. You don't have to consciously manage these rhythms. Your body does it for you, has been doing it since you were born, will continue doing it for all your days. The circadian dance of alertness and rest, with yawning as one of its expressions. So as you lie there now, perhaps in the evening, perhaps preparing for sleep, and if you feel that urge to yawn rising, you can recognize it as part of this ancient rhythm, your body following its patterns, your brain managing the transition from wakefulness toward rest. Let the yawns come. They're part of your body's wisdom, part of how you move through time. So here we are, near the end of our journey through the world of yawning. We've covered so much ground together. The mechanics of a yawn, the brain regions involved, the various theories about why we yawn, the contagious nature of yawning, the animals who yawn alongside us, the daily rhythms that shape when yawning occurs. And yet, after all of this exploration, we still don't have all the answers. There's something deeply satisfying about that, isn't there? In our modern world, we're used to having information at our fingertips. Questions answered instantly. Mysteries resolved with a quick search. We've mapped the human genome, landed rovers on Mars, developed artificial intelligence that can hold conversations. And yet, we still can't say with complete certainty why we yawn. It's humbling, in the best possible way. Science is a process of incremental discovery. Researchers around the world continue to study yawning. They design clever experiments, measure brain activity, observe patterns, propose new theories. Each study adds another small piece to the puzzle. Maybe in 10 years, or 20, or 50, we'll have a more complete answer. Maybe someone will design the perfect experiment that definitively shows what yawning does and why evolution preserved it. Maybe all the competing theories will resolve into one comprehensive explanation. Or maybe yawning will continue to hold some mystery. Maybe it's more complex than we imagine. Maybe it serves different purposes in different contexts, and there's no single simple answer to be found. Either way, the fact that we're still figuring it out doesn't diminish the beauty of yawning. If anything, it enhances it. Think about what we do know with certainty. We know that yawning is universal among humans. Every culture, every society, every person, we all yawn. It crosses all boundaries. We know that it's ancient beyond measure, preserved across hundreds of millions of years of evolution, present in countless species. We know that it's automatic. It happens without your permission, without your conscious control, your body and brain coordinating perfectly to produce those few seconds of a yawn. We know that it feels good. That sense of satisfaction, of completion. Your body rewards you for yawning, even though we're not entirely sure why it needs you to yawn in the first place. We know that it connects us socially. The contagious spread of yawns, the way we're influenced by each other, the threads of empathy and social cognition woven through this simple behavior. And we know that it's part of your daily rhythm, part of how you transition through waking and sleeping, alertness and rest, the cycle of your days. All of that is certain. All of that is wonderful. The mystery of why doesn't erase the beauty of what is. There's a tendency to think that scientific understanding somehow diminishes wonder, that once you know how something works, it becomes less magical, less special. But that's not true at all. Understanding the neuroscience of yawning, knowing about the hypothalamus and neurotransmitters and mirror neurons. None of that makes yawning less remarkable. If anything, it makes it more so, because now you can appreciate not just the yawn itself, but the elegant complexity beneath it, the sophisticated neural machinery that makes it possible, and the remaining mysteries. They're an invitation to curiosity, to continued questioning, to the recognition that the universe is deeper and more complex than we can fully grasp. Some of the most profound experiences in life are the ones we can't completely explain. Love, beauty, consciousness itself. The fact that yawning belongs, even in a small way, to that category of experiences. Well, that's something special. You'll go on yawning for the rest of your life, probably thousands more times. Most of those yawns will come and go without you really noticing them. They'll just happen, automatic and unremarked. But maybe, occasionally, you'll pause for a moment when you yawn. You'll notice it. You'll appreciate the complexity of it. The way your jaw opens perfectly, your breath deepens, your whole body participates. The way it satisfies some need your conscious mind doesn't even recognize. You'll remember that scientists are still studying this, that it connects you to every other human, to countless other species, to an evolutionary history stretching back to the distant past. You'll recognize it as both utterly ordinary and quietly extraordinary. That's the gift of paying attention to simple things, of exploring the everyday with genuine curiosity. You discover that nothing is actually as simple as it first appears. That wonder is available everywhere, even in something as commonplace as a yawn. The poet Walt Whitman wrote, "I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars." He was talking about finding the cosmic in the ordinary, the profound in the mundane. A yawn is like that. It's just a yawn. And it's also a window into neuroscience, evolution, social connection, the mysteries of consciousness and behavior. It's ordinary and remarkable at once. So as we prepare to close this exploration, as your body perhaps settles deeper into rest, as yawns may continue to come, natural and effortless, take a moment to appreciate the mystery. Not all questions need immediate answers. Not all puzzles need to be solved tonight. Some things can simply be observed, experienced, wondered about. You are a yawning creature. You always have been since before you were born. You always will be for all your days. And that's a small but genuine marvel, a reminder that you're part of something larger, something ancient, something that connects you to the world and to other beings in ways both understood and still being discovered. Let yourself rest in that knowledge, in that mystery, in that simple, profound act of being alive. And so, we come to the end of our time together tonight. We've wandered through the world of yawning, explored its mechanics and its mysteries, met the animals who share this behavior with us, considered the theories and the questions that remain. But more than that, we've spent this time simply being curious together, paying attention to something small and ordinary, finding depth and wonder in the everyday. That's something you can carry with you beyond tonight. This practice of noticing, of being interested in the world, in your own experience, in the simple phenomena that make up a life. There's so much around you every day that's worth observing, worth appreciating. The way light changes through a window, the rhythm of your own breathing, the feeling of fabric against your skin, the taste of water, the sound of wind. All of it ordinary. All of it, when you really pay attention, quietly extraordinary. Yawning is just one small example, one doorway into a larger way of being present with your life. And now, it's time to let all of this settle, to release the words, the ideas, the information. Let them drift away like leaves on water. Your body knows what it needs to do now. It knows how to rest, how to let go, how to move from wakefulness into sleep. You don't have to try. You don't have to do anything at all. Just let yourself be held by this moment, by the quiet, by the darkness, by whatever surface supports you. If thoughts come, let them pass. If you yawn, let it happen naturally. If sleep comes, welcome it gently. There's nothing you need to figure out, nothing you need to solve or understand or remember. Tonight was just about curiosity, about wonder, about spending some time exploring something simple together. And now that time is complete. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for giving yourself this space to simply listen and rest. May you sleep peacefully. May you wake refreshed, and may you continue to find wonder in yawning and in all the small, beautiful mysteries of being alive. Good night.